Hey, and welcome back to the Youngstown Click podcast. I am so excited to be coming to you yet again from Sigaro Cigar Lounge in Hubbard with a very special guest. In fact, many of you are probably going to recognize the man that I have on the show today. I'm super excited. Before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor and tell you about Ohio Flame. They make custom-made fire pits, and they are made right here in Columbiana. They last for years, and you could customize them. In fact, I just saw one that had the OSU thing in them. So make sure you check them out at www.ohioflame.com. So thank you again, Ohio Flame, for trusting and believing in Youngstown Click. With that said, today I am excited to interview the very first Black mayor and the youngest mayor of Youngstown. So this guy sitting across from me right now has made history in our area. And guys, we're going to get behind the scenes today. We're going to ask him some questions that, the news and the sound bites never ask. So here we are. Welcome, Jay Williams. He is the former mayor, and he is now the president of the Hartford Foundation, an organization that's over 100 years old, and now he is at the helm, which is pretty impressive. He has gone on from Youngstown to do all kinds of things, but we're going to get into that. Go ahead and say hello, Jay.
Debbie, thank you very much for the invitation, for the enthusiastic introduction. A secret that your audience may not know, we've spent like a half an hour even before getting onto the podcast, talking and laughing and
I wish
the
we would have
mutual
recorded
connection.
that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We should have just accidentally hit record, but thank you for the opportunity, invitation to be here. It is always a great time to be back in Youngstown, but then to have your invitation to come here and be a part of your podcast. I'm excited. Congratulations on the podcast, and I'm happy to be here. Absolutely.
I mean, I know you came back you have a schedule, and so for you to take the time to actually sit and talk to us is so honoring, and we thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's mutual. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so right off the bat, when you come back to Youngstown, because you're only here for 3 days this particular trip, what is your favorite? What are some of the places that you just are like, I'm looking forward to?
So there is no single favorite. And I'm glad you didn't put me on the spot. Like, what is your?
Right. Oh yeah.
So listen, it is everything from Charlie Staples to Handel's to Wedgwood to Bellaria to Nicolini's. Listen, there are just a litany of places that I absolutely have to at least attempt to go.
Yes,
to what I still call, and I hope they don't get offended, what I still call Mr. Paul's Bakery. That's classic. It's classic bakery on Boardman, but it's like, to me, it's Mr. Paul's Bakery.
Right.
And just any,
you know what I miss is the donut oven. Do you remember the donut oven?
I remember the donut oven. I remember. I was never a big donut fan, but I absolutely remember the donut oven.
That used to be when I'd come back from college, or when my mom would come visit me. She would bring a dozen of donuts, cream sticks.
Like it was yesterday. And in fact, after or during church or between church services, there were a bunch of people who would love to go to the donut oven and bring them back. So just all of those iconic places that were a part of the city of Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley, many of which are no longer here, but the memories that they bring, I wax nostalgic. So, and there are a whole host of other businesses that I just... Today, it was Jib Jab. I had this thing. I stopped by Jib Jab. I hadn't been there in forever. So all the things that I'm sure my doctor's like, Jay, really? You're like 52 now. This is not the kind of culinary, trip you should be going on. Exactly. But I'm like, I only get here 2 or 3 times a year, so I try to do what I can, and I'll make up for it later. Yeah.
So we have a lot of, you understand then, because you're raised here, and I'm totally jumping ahead, but when you've moved to DC or even Connecticut, is there a similar feel with these local owned, established businesses, or is this something a lot of people say what they miss about this area is the food?
Yeah, but it's so DC was different. I'm sure there were, but not being from there. Yeah, DC to me was more the stereotypical what you see in terms of lots of
the bagel shops,
great places and like that. Connecticut, more of a similar feel to the Mahoning Valley. Okay. One of the things that I still say is that as many high-end restaurants as there are in D.C. and Michelin stars and all the fancy things, that I have yet to find Italian food that is as good anywhere else. You walk into any Italian joint on any corner in the Mahoning Valley, and the food is better that I've found in New York City and Washington. And now, again, I know there are good places there, not disparaging those places.
I know what you're saying.
But when someone says wedding soup, I'm like, you got a high bar to clear when you're talking about food from the Mahoning Valley. And that can apply to a whole host of other of our other ethnic cuisines.
So you guys hear that? Like another thing to be just be
Absolutely.
happy. Yes, that's
Absolutely.
It's something that kind of like resonates through our blood. So Kelly Pavlik actually just sat in that chair a couple weeks ago, and he said that one of his favorite places is Papa Gigi's Italian Village on 224. Have you been there?
I have not. Papa
Okay.
Gigi's Italian Village.
Yeah, it's
I have not been
across
there.
the street from the shops at the Boardman Park.
Okay.
And he's won awards for his sauce and everything. Yeah, which is, I mean, saying a lot because we
Yeah.
have so many good good
Absolutely.
sauce in our area. But
Absolutely.
definitely check that out.
Well, one of the things that I one of my side gigs or side hustle that I would like to aspire to do is like maybe franchising some of this Youngstown culinary design. Ice cream, the Italian,
Yes.
that might be a good
Yes.
retirement gig. I'm going to be working a while. Ethan, our son just turned 13, so I've still got many years to work and save
Yes,
for college,
and you're
but that
your
might
first
be my
employee.
thing.
You're your
Yeah,
first-
yeah, absolutely. Like, dude, you got to earn some of your keep here. This is going to be part of your college. So, yeah.
Right. Oh man, well, Handles is going nationwide too. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk Jay Williams, young Jay Williams. Right? Okay. You grew up in this area.
Absolutely.
What part of town did you grow up in?
So I was born on the south side, Dewey Avenue,
Wow.
55 West Dewey Avenue. We moved away for a few years. My dad worked for General Electric, so we moved to a small town called Bucyrus, Ohio for a few years, but then came back to Youngstown, lived on the east side from 1980 to 1995, so 25 years
East
on the
side.
east side.
Okay.
That's 15 years on the east side. And then we moved back to the south side to Genesee Drive.
Okay.
And then my wife and I, when we got married, we built a brand new house on Castle Court. So I've lived on the south side, the east side, the west side. I haven't lived on the north side. I guess I still have to check that
Yeah,
box.
you're right.
But lots
Right.
of family grew up and lived on the north side. Yeah.
So wow, that's crazy. So okay, man, you are so interesting to talk to because then my brain is just going. Okay, talk to us about your youth growing up in Youngstown in all the different sides of town. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like the easy environment during those days.
It wasn't.
So tell us how you went from being a youth to, and then we'll get into like what made you decide, hey, I think I could maybe do this mayor thing.
Well, listen, I was formed and shaped by Youngstown and the good things about Youngstown and the challenging things about Youngstown. I remember spending just, a lot of time in Mill Creek Park. So when we lived on the east side, it was far out. It wasn't easy. I wasn't old enough to drive. So
Yeah.
Either one of my parents would take me over to my cousin's house who lived close to Mill Creek Park, or we'd spend a night over there. Or as I got older, there was a couple of times I actually rode my bike from the east side over to the south side. But
Wow.
spent lots of time in Mill Creek Park. Remember, the trips to Idora Park, over on the east side, which was it's interesting. People who understand the east side it wasn't as fully developed, so it was sort of a rural country feel.
Yeah, okay.
And spent time in Lincoln Park and Lincoln Pool, down at Southside Park. So I just really remember this city as a place very fondly.
Yeah.
That back in those days when both parents were working in the summertime, you got on your bike and you just rode around and spent all day outside. And
Wow.
even down in Lincoln Park, a friend of mine who lived next door, we would build tree houses. So it was not, if not an idyllic childhood, it was a young
It was
child
safe to be
experience.
outdoors.
Exactly.
People were connecting.
Right.
Yeah.
And bad stuff happened. I mean, it certainly. In my younger years, I wasn't as tuned to it. As I got older, you started to see some of the things to be concerned about. But it was just, I thought it was a great city to grow up in. I mean, I remember downtown when Strauss's was still downtown, and I would go downtown and get malts in the mezzanine.
Oh my goodness, you got to experience that.
Yeah, dude, you're shopping down at Hills on the east side, over in the plaza off of McCartney Road,
Okay.
Lincoln Plaza.
Yeah,
Hills department store, and going in there at Christmas time. Yeah, so it's just great memories.
Man, I used
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so now as a young guy in growing up in Youngstown, you're having that, and you were raised in a church, right?
Yep, I was. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So you had that good influence in
Yes.
your life and stuff. Were you ever? I just went last Saturday to a walk for it's the Don't Use the F Word campaign, which is the F word is fentanyl.
Right.
And it's kind of eye-opening to how many kids are just dying, even just trying drugs one time at a party. The drugs nowadays are different than maybe even 20 years ago
Right.
because they're laced so often.
Right.
And just to see, the pictures of these kids who, some of them were, had an addiction problem. Other times they just, it was like, hey, they tried it one time at a party and
Right.
it just, so did you ever have an encounter with a troubled youth or like kind of getting into trouble as a youth?
So it's interesting. I was raised in a church and wouldn't change anything about that. And there were some who would say, well, you were sheltered. And I don't know if it was sheltered or just the structure in which I was raised,
Yeah,
but absolutely, but also had friends who were not raised in a church.
Okay.
So, the crowd that I ran with tended to be the folks who I'd known and grew up with in church or at school. But because of, living on the east side, I also had friends who went to, East High and went to public schools and just had a variety of different lived experiences different than mine. So I was probably, if not shy, a little bit of an introvert, a little bit of an awkward kid. So I wasn't necessarily always running with a fast crowd.
Okay, yeah.
Not that I didn't find it appealing as a kid. You're like, man,
course,
look at the cool kids over there.
Right,
but part of it was like fear or naivety.
Yeah,
Like, I'm not sure what I'm getting into.
Right.
But that being said, certainly had friends who, found themselves in difficult situations, whether it was with drugs or, with violence that ultimately gun violence and things that, who ultimately ended up either incarcerated or deceased as a result of that. So, looking back, I am grateful for some of the structure and the protective environment that, again, wasn't making you naive or blind to things that happen,
right,
but set very clear boundaries that I didn't always agree with,
right,
didn't always like, but
right.
Now, decades later, I look back and appreciate those who said, well, maybe you might think I'm being a little hard on you now, but you'll appreciate it as you get older. And guess what? I'm older, and I very much do appreciate it. And I didn't think it made me better than kids that were having different experiences.
No, in fact, at the time, you're not as cool because
I wasn't. I wasn't
Right,
exactly.
right.
You weren't as cool, but now you're like, man, I'm glad.
Right,
I'm glad
right.
that I didn't have some of the exposures that I could have.
That's
had.
what I hope that kids can get that message, that to be protected from something is not necessarily to be that you don't have to, like, there's certain things you want to be naive
Absolutely.
in. I don't want to know what it's like to be addicted. I don't want to know. There's certain things it's okay to be naive
I agree.
in. You know what I mean? It's just
and that's, I'm glad you said it, because that's, and it's hard to explain that to somebody who's 13. Our son is now 13, and that you think, oh, Dad, you just don't want me to know anything, or Dad, you don't understand. It's like, I do understand. So you try to be both empathetic to let them grow a little bit and explore the world so they're not living in a bubble. But at the same time, to your point, I'm doing this and you may not appreciate it now, but I'm trying to do it so that when you are on your own, that, that the things that might have seemed appealing as a teenager, you realize now that there are repercussions and consequences that you are not ready to handle.
Right. I didn't realize until I was living in the girls' dorm at college how the way I was raised made me a leader, because everybody tended to think the same and have the similar experiences. And then I come along kind of sheltered, kind of like, kind of protected, I should say. And I had just a different way of thinking. But that different way of thinking made me a leader in so many circles, because it was like thinking outside the box. But to me, it was just normal. Right. Because we weren't allowed to go along with society and the flow.
And when you're young, it's awkward. It makes you stand out. You're a nerd. You're whatever the term the kids are using now. But when you get older, it does. It's like, oh, I see. She wasn't just falling into the crowd, or she wasn't succumbing to peer pressure. She was willing to say no or to stand her ground, as opposed to those who are like, oh, the peer pressure. And we've all experienced peer pressure.
Absolutely.
But to your point, where you get just a few years older, you're like, boy, I am so glad that was the way I was raised. Yeah.
So, okay. So when did you decide, okay, all of a sudden you at some point you were like, hey, maybe I could be the mayor? Like, how in the world? Because you broke so many barriers with that.
That's a great question. So it was gradual, and I think early on I did not realize that was sort of my destiny at that point, or that part of my destiny. And a lot of it had to do with the influence of the way I was raised. I grew up in Youngstown at a time where the message to our generation was like, listen, the best days are behind us. There's nothing going on here. You got to leave.
Okay.
The steel mills are gone, crime, the crack epidemic, get your education and go. And a lot of my peers and contemporaries did that. I always sensed that there was something for me here. Okay. That there was a call or an obligation. It didn't understand that it would lead me to being mayor.
Wow.
But throughout my college at YSU, I was afforded opportunities to be employed such that, you know, my career track, even when I was looking to go somewhere else, was like, nope, here's another opportunity. Here's another opportunity.
Wow.
Long story short.
So you went to YSU. What was your major?
Finance, business administration.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't even politics. Okay,
Nope,
okay.
no.
Okay.
Started off in engineering, and then after a few calculus classes, realized like, oh, okay, there's things other than calculus and differential equations.
All right. Okay.
So ended up in business administration, ended up starting my career here in banking, left banking to go work for the city. So it was just this notion of wanting to have an impact in my city, not knowing how I was going to do it, not knowing that it was going to ultimately lead to me being mayor, but just this notion of a city that had been written off and talked about and stereotyped. I was defensive. Like, this is my town. Like, you can't just say that this is murder capital or Rust Belt city and there's nothing good that can come out of Youngstown, Ohio. So, you know, one thing led to another. Got involved in a planning initiative that was at the point called Youngstown 2010. The mayoral election was coming up, and when we saw that the folks running for mayor weren't bought into a vision that the people had spent time and energy investing in, I said, I got to run because if nothing else, we can force the conversation to be about this vision, this plan.
Okay.
Never held office, political neophyte, wasn't going to run as a party-affiliated candidate, and people were like, well, just good luck with that. You know, I can force a debate about this, but I'm not going to win.
Okay.
Well, ultimately, people are like, that's what we want to hear talk about. Had volunteers, people who were willing to give their time and energy and their expertise.
Who was behind Youngstown 2010? Like, who spearheaded that?
So ultimately, it was a city initiative.
Oh, okay.
So to the credit of Mayor McKelvey and the then city council members, provided the funding and the framework, the planning department. But, you know, at the end of the day,
it wasn't gaining the traction.
Early on, the framework, but Anthony Kobeck at the time, who was a planner in the planning, Bill D'Avignon, and myself as a CDA director, sort of the three of us, it was dropped in our lap like, okay, now go do this. So we worked with YSU and Hunter Morrison, and ultimately who was behind it were the people of Youngstown. You know, they wanted to chart a path for a future that was different than, oh, that's the city that saw the collapse of the steel mills.
Okay, so if we can, what year was this?
Boy, this was back in 2000, and I started working for the city. This was in 2002 and 2003.
Okay, and at that point in time, was it still considered dangerous to go downtown?
Yes.
I mean, because I spend a lot of time downtown now, and I think about you. I've never gotten to meet you before today, but I think about you often because I know that you were there at the helm of the turnaround that now you could walk. I mean, we got the amphitheater and everything. Okay, around 2002. Okay, so
there's still that spotty perception. People would come downtown for Party at the Plaza, you know, the Italian Fest, but there was still this hesitation about downtown Youngstown, and there was still sort of the architectural feel of downtown Youngstown was still just a city that had seen its better days. Now, there was some improvement that had started, and again, crediting going back to Mayor Ungaro, Mayor McKelvey. So each administration had done something to help move downtown in a better direction. So I just got to be a part of that sequence of other mayors doing that. But yeah, that's where the vision really started taking off. I like to say that, again, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but you know, it was Mayor McKelvey that got. So Mayor Ungaro, I think that's when the funding. At the end of Mayor Ungaro's term, the funding was talked about for the Convocation Center. Mayor McKelvey got it built, and I like to say it was my administration that we got it profitable. So
I love it. Thank you for sharing that because I had no clue about that history.
Yep.
Because I was gone for college during those days, and so that definitely adds a timeline and a story. And I always say everything we do, anybody does, stands on the shoulders of somebody.
Absolutely.
And when you find out who that is, the appreciation.
Acknowledge it, and it makes you feel better. And that's why, and again, just for each of those mayors and what they did, and they hand the city off to their successor, and hopefully you build on that and hand it off to your successor in a way that allows us to move forward.
Okay, so now you were mayor for 2 terms?
I was in the second year, so I had my first full term, and I was in the second year of my second term when I stepped down to join the Obama administration. Okay,
so let's back up real quick. What are you? I know that a mayor does a lot of things, but what is like maybe a highlight of your administrative time as mayor?
I always enjoyed going into the schools, talking to the students, and telling him, listen, I grew up on the south side and the east side. Like I'm no different than you. I didn't become mayor because I was some anointed special political dynamo. I didn't become mayor because I had a lot of money. I didn't become mayor because I was the smartest person in my class. It was like I became mayor of my city because I cared, and people. I went and asked people to put their trust in me to help to vote for me. And just to see the reaction of kids, like, the mayor's here. I was like, yeah, guess what? I used to play on that same playground that you're playing on, or I used to go to the same store that you're going to. So just to have the opportunity to talk to students and young people and have them say, like, the mayor is a person like you. I put on my pants the same way.
Right.
I have good days and bad days. And this is
cool.
This is your city as much as it's my city, and collectively we have an obligation to try to do good.
Wow, that is incredible. So, just out of curiosity, in those days, did you know a man named Tito Brown?
I met Tito. I met Tito probably around the time that I was thinking about running for mayor. So Tito and his mom, they had been like involved and were very politically active. And,
were they? Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So I met Tito probably around. I came to work for the city in 2000. From banking, so I met Tito probably 2003, 2004.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So he was down in the city. That's
I think he was at YSU and or at the county. Yeah,
Got
I
it.
think he was at YSU,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So now so the highlight was going to talk to kids, which is really cool because that's I think where legacy is born is the impact that you make on the future generations. Okay, so. Then tell us what happened then. So you were in your second term.
Right.
The Obama came to town. Is that what happened?
Yeah, so he had come to town campaigning, and he was at a fundraiser out at, I think it was Herb Washington's house. And the Mark Dan was the Attorney General. So like Mark Dan was supposed to introduce then Senator Obama. I was supposed to introduce Mark Dan.
Okay.
Mark Dan doesn't show up. So
wait, who is Mark Dan?
Mark Dan was the Attorney General of Ohio. So he was a local.
Okay.
He was a local attorney.
Okay.
Who then was elected to Attorney General, and unfortunately, you had an unceremonious end in terms of that part of it. And
Oh, man.
I think he's now doing better things.
But he was from here?
Yeah, he was from here. Yeah, from Niles or Girard or
And then
somewhere.
became Attorney General?
Yeah,
Wow, okay.
was like the first Attorney General from the Mahoney Valley in forever.
Wow. And Herb Washington is the guy who owned all those McDonald's?
Yeah, successful businessman.
Okay.
So again, a fundraiser for then Senator Obama.
Okay.
So again, I'm the little wig. It's supposed to introduce Mark Dan, who's supposed to introduce President
Right,
Obama. When
right.
Mark Dan doesn't show up, they're like, oh, I guess you got to introduce Senator Obama.
Okay.
So I got to meet him there. Was a supporter, but long story short, did some surrogate on the campaign trail, but was focused on being mayor. And I knew at one point I would love to work in D.C., but I was like, I need to finish my second term as mayor. So long story short, one day my secretary was like, the White House is on the phone. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
and that conversation started and went on for about a year before they, things lined up and they asked me to join the administration to take over the auto recovery office.
Okay, so tell us, the auto recovery, was that during the Cash for Clunkers?
Yes,
Is
so
what
that was
happened?
during that
Okay.
whole time when
Okay.
GM and Chrysler were both going through bankruptcy restructuring, and there was a guy, Al Ratner, I can't think of his name, led the team that was working with the corporations. I was charged with leading the team that was working with communities. So part of what they said is like, Youngstown has been through this with the steel mills.
Right.
We've got places like Racine, Wisconsin, and Kenosha, and other places that are undergoing this economic upheaval because the largest employer is now closing or downsizing, that being the car plants.
Yeah, okay.
So, I was like, well, can you sort of take what's happening in Youngstown and share that across the country? But we now have federal resources, at least for this time,
Yeah.
the stimulus and the economic
got it.
recovery.
Yes.
So it
Man,
was.
it seems so long ago.
Yeah, it was. It seems like forever.
Wow.
So that's what I did for 2 years. I spent a year in the White House as a president's liaison to mayors,
Okay.
and then I spent the last 3 years of the
So
administration.
you had an office in the White House?
It was in the executive office building, so it wasn't in the West Wing. It was across
Okay.
from the West Wing.
Got it.
The person who headed my department wasn't just West Wing, so we spent a lot of time there.
Okay.
But my office was what they call the Eisenhower Executive Office Building.
Okay.
and then spent the last 3 years after I was confirmed by the Senate as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Economic Development Administration.
Got it. Okay. So did you enjoy it?
I did. I enjoyed it immensely. What I enjoyed was traveling across the country and not saying I'm from Washington, D.C., I'm here to help, but I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and we understand what this community is going through. And I think that's what allowed me to relate to people, because while it was an honor to be selected and appointed by the president to do economic development across the country, the credibility came from when I said I'm from Youngstown. So immediately they're like, what? So we understand what it's like to have a precipitous decline of population. We understand what it's like to have an economic base that is just shredded. We understand what it's like to be written off and stereotyped. So in that regard, whether it was in places like rural Kentucky and the coal miners and the coal communities that were going through their transition, or the places like the auto communities, it gave me an opportunity to connect and share the Youngstown story across the country.
That's incredible. So I read one time that the lottery really picked up, a lot of gambling and stuff really picked up on the tails of the steel mills closing in this area. Did you see a particular trend, like in these communities? Like what did you see?
Yeah, they were looking for the silver bullet. They were looking for, and we fell victim to that also. I remember being in college when Bill Clinton and Al Gore came, and they promised the Defense Finance Accounting Center was going to be like 8,000 jobs in downtown Youngstown. I wasn't alive, but I remember the stories, or read the stories about the blimp factory at the Youngstown Regional Airport. Like that was going to be the next big thing. And there was always this next big thing, and the Avanti car plant and the Saturn.
The chill can.
The chill can. And we were supposed to get the Saturn car plant. And these communities are like, we lost something and we're looking for something to fill that void. And communities like people go through mourning. We never really went through the full process of grief, and we sort of got stuck. So there were other communities, like it was casinos. Oh, if we just put a casino there. That was talking, casino. I'm like, those are not economic development drivers. Everybody thinks they're going to recreate Las Vegas. And so, that was a phenomenon that communities struggled with.
Yeah. Wow. Even in that, I see a lot of times the people think that because this one entity is booming, that everybody else, and I'm a huge proponent of business does trickle down. Yeah. Success at the top trickles down. I understand that, but casinos, like when you talk to people who live in Vegas, unless they're involved in that thing, they're not. It's not necessarily. It's not. I don't know, but I mean,
here's the premise of casinos. They never say. More people have to lose their money in order for the casino to have a handful of people win. That's the basic economic. It doesn't work. The house always has to win in the end.
Yes.
But as humans, we see, the big numbers. Oh, my friends hit. My friend's brother's cousin's nephew hit.
I hit for this
so
much.
I'm going to be the one that hits. And even when you do hit, I hit for $680. But I spent $3,400 over the past 6 months. So
it's
I'm still
amazing
in a hole.
how we think, like the ding, 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 it all feels good. But did you know, on a side note, and I don't know if you knew this, but Hollywood Casino, they have, casinos all over the country. They grossed the biggest opening weekend of any of their openings here in Youngstown.
Doesn't surprise me.
Isn't that crazy?
And again,
people say there's no money here, there's no opportunity.
Let me be clear. Adults have the right to make decisions with their own money. Yes. Hopefully, they're responsible decisions.
Hopefully, it's not the silver bullet, though. That's
absolutely.
The thing. You do it for entertainment.
Gambling's a part of society. We got sports gambling, all that. But the proliferation that people think that this is going to be my ticket out, and then the data will also show that people are spending a higher proportion of their, people on the lower end of the income spectrum spend a higher proportion of their money on gambling. People who are super wealthy, they're not spending, a bunch of their money on gambling. They're not spending a fraction of their money on gambling. So again, I'm not here preaching against people gambling.
No.
But it's this notion that it's being sold as like, this is your ticket.
Right. I found that fascinating to me because I love documentaries and I love patterns. I don't know. I'm just drawn to patterns. And so that surprised me when hear this area that's considered the most economic, not the most. We've rebounded a little bit, but we took an economic hit, and yet hear of all the, I mean,
Right.
New Orleans,
Right.
I mean, all these different places. Here we showed up.
My
We showed up
pastor
for
says
opening
people do what they want to do.
Yeah.
You know, people cry broke until it's time to go and do whatever they want to. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure I've been that too. It's like, oh, I ain't got the money, but you let something come up that I want to do. All of a sudden, my wife will say, yeah, you can find the money to do the things you want to do. Right.
Right. Okay. So now you're out of DC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how long were you in that position?
I was in D.C. for 6 years total. So,
Okay, 6 years.
3 years at the Commerce Department, a year in the White House, and 2.5+ years at the Auto Recovery Office.
Got it.
Yeah.
And obviously you had strong ties here to Youngstown.
Yes.
So did you keep those and maintain a lot of those
Absolutely.
when you were gone? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were in D.C., we'd get back to Youngstown 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay.
It was a relatively easy drive, and for major holidays or weddings or
that's
funerals,
nice.
or just because.
Right.
And maintain family ties, obviously ties with friends and other associates, and would see people both in D.C. So even now, we left D.C. at the end of the administration. Contemplated coming back here. It's funny that at that point the gubernatorial race was going on, so I sort of flirted a little bit. More so like to try to angle like, is there a lieutenant governor opportunity? Not that I thought it was going to be governor, but because the lieutenant governor in Ohio typically had been charged with economic development, so that was my like, wow, if I could come do that.
Okay.
Long story short, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, which is we're almost 100 years old, was looking for a new CEO, so they were doing a CEO search, and one thing led to another, and I was in that search, and the board offered me an opportunity to serve as in the current position.
So you got the position took you to Hartford.
Yes.
You didn't just move to Hartford.
No. Yeah, the position. It's funny. I had been to Hartford on a couple of occasions when I was in D.C. for D.C. work, but what brought me to Hartford, ironically, about a year after I was in Hartford for something else, was this CEO search, and little did I know I'd be in the same community talking to some of the same folks, but now as the president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And to be in the position where you get to, they say that there's some, what's the word, jobs or occupations where you have to say no, like a lot. Mm-hmm. But in your position, you get to say yes a lot, and you get to see that. I bet that's pretty rewarding.
It is, but we still have to say no a lot. We still have to say no more than we do. So people are like, give away money. Giving away money is not as easy as it sounds, because you want to give it away in a thoughtful way. And I should say, give it away grants, investments, and things like that. So yes, it is nice to say yes a lot, but we still say no. And one of the things that I don't miss is, as mayor, you have those same things, but you're always chasing a budget deficit, or are you trying not to raise taxes?
Oh, yeah.
Like in philanthropy, we have an endowment that generates, because of the generosity of people over the course of the last almost 100 years, that generates a certain amount of revenue that, come good year or bad year, there's still resources we have to give to the community. Obviously, we try to grow those resources through engagement with donors and through smart investment. But it is a relief not to have to each year wonder if there's going to be a budget deficit. So I am blessed to do that. It is. It's a different perspective.
So So even though you've come back several times, what has surprised you the most, or what delights you the most when you come back and you see the difference that's happening, or even, and then I'm going to ask you a hard question. Which is, if you were a mayor again for a day, what would you in Youngstown? What would you do? So we'll get to that. But what has either surprised or delighted you the most about what you've seen since you left?
I'm delighted by seeing people who I have not seen in a long time, who will like see me walking down the street. They'll be like, they'll do a double take, like, what? I was like, yeah. I'm like, this is home. This is where I'm from. This is my place. This is my people. To see people and the success they've had, to see the ongoing progress the city has made, whether it be downtown or the Youngstown State campus, that is not the university that I graduated from. I mean that in a positive sense. I'm like, if Youngstown State University was looking as cool then as it is now, man, that'd be. So the people, the things that remind me this is home, just the experiences. Sometimes when I come, I would just get in a car and drive to where my house used to be, where I grew up, or the playground I used to play on, or whatever the case is. And just the feeling. I mean, this is still a place full of people who are offering and contributing to the progress, overcoming the challenges. So it's just, coming home is a centering experience for me in many instances.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So, all right, if you were mayor, and this is not to diss anybody or say
No,
no,
I don't
whatever.
take it like that, right.
Okay. If you were to be mayor again for a day and could make whatever kind of changes or add whatever, I don't even know what all the mayor does, but if you could do that, if you had power again in Youngstown for a day, and what would you do?
I would decline the job because you can't be mayor of Youngstown for a day. I'm sorry, that's a political answer.
Okay.
Yep, I knew you're not going to bag me to that corner. I would be like, I respectfully decline. You cannot be mayor for Youngstown for a day because you will either be on an exhilarating high and you will expect, this is cool, it's always going to work out, or you'll be on a frustrating low and think like, how on earth?
Okay,
because
so you have to have the whole full gamut.
It is. It is. Youngstown is a roller coaster of emotion, and there are days when I was mayor that I thought, man, this is it. We're finally got it.
Yeah.
And then, an hour and a half later, I'm like, good Lord Almighty, like, how am I going to, how am I going to get up tomorrow? And it's just, it's frustrating and it's maniacal, but it keeps you coming back because there is so much potential in this city, and there's such a love that you have that gets down into your DNA, and it's just like one of those relationships where it's just like, I don't want to say love hate because there's not hate here, but like love and frustration. and anxiety.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a random question I'm just thinking of now. What would you say is the most underrated but important job, like that in the cabinet? Like, I don't even know all the cabinet positions.
Probably chief of staff, which different mayors use it in different ways.
Okay.
I brought it, I used it and had that title because you need someone who will give you good, candid advice.
Okay.
Someone who will challenge your thinking and be willing to say, hey, this is not good. This is a bad idea.
Right.
Or did you consider that? And in my opinion, other people will have, there's, each of the positions are essential. But I say chief of staff because that person, he or she is working with you when no one's looking, when the press isn't there.
So influential with their advice.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything. Wow.
And when you screw up, they got to be able to say, hey, yep, that was not a good move. And here's what we need to do to try to make it better. So,
Chief
every
of staff.
position, a leader will be made or broken by the people who they appoint around them. And that's like every cabinet position. But that, to me, that position was unique because it was more of an intimate relationship in terms of just.
But not in front of the news all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I have some more questions, but this is a little another detour. In your position and in your travels and everything, who have, other than the president of obviously the United States, who have you met that you were just kind of like, oh, this is cool?
Oh, that's a great question, man.
This is what happens. I put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's because there are a lot of them. Some of them are well known and famous. Others of them are not. Nobody would know them. But I'm like, wow, you're just such an amazing person. I met Bishop Desmond Tutu.
That sounds familiar.
In historic figure. And met him in Washington D.C. I met there's just so many people, and it's like easier. Obviously not easy. I mean, easier. Some of the famous ones, but they were just So
some of the coolest ones, the ones that you were like, wow, this is so cool. Maybe we won't even know. So it's not like a celebrity.
Right.
Like,
there's like this list of famous, quote unquote, famous people I've met, and they were cool.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like great.
Yeah.
But then there was other people. I was like, you are just a fascinating person who I love sitting here talking to and appreciate and feel that I'm better off because I've met them. There are just dozens, if not hundreds of those. And they just each sort of leave a little imprint on your life or your psyche. And I might not remember their names, but I remember, I remember
conversation
being down
connection.
in Tennessee or Mississippi or somewhere in this little small town. We were doing some event in. And the town came out for this announcement we were making. They had like the high school band out. But the people were just so grateful and appreciative that their town was getting some investment. It was almost like brought you to tears. It's like, hey, we're just doing like this little $500,000 project. And you're like, no, this is like the biggest thing. So it's like they closed the school and the band came out and played.
Yeah,
you're like,
that's awesome.
You're like, wow.
I love it when people are genuinely thankful and not entitled.
Right.
I think sometimes people get so they get so used to getting help that they stop appreciating it.
And I'm like, this is like, I'm glad to be down here, but I tell people, like, I'm from a town similar to this. Well, Youngstown, that town was even smaller than Youngstown. But just those moments and they deserved everything that they were getting, but for so long they felt that, oh, we're not a large enough community or large enough town. The same thing happened when I was down in Pikeville, Kentucky. I was talking about the Youngstown 2010 story. They're like, wait a minute. Like, instead of steel, down here it's coal. And yes, the demographics of Pikeville and Youngstown are very different politically and ethnically. But when you came down to it, they were going through the same struggle. So they invited, the Republican chair, a guy by the name of Howard Rogers, who's a Republican chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, very powerful position in Washington, D.C., invites the young former black mayor of Youngstown, Ohio. He's like, you got to come talk to my people.
Wow.
Like, in most instances, I wouldn't be a person down in Pikeville, Kentucky that would be seen as someone they want to hear from. But in that regard, they're like, oh, yeah, we don't care that you work for Obama. We don't care about the politics. What we care about is you understand our story.
Wow.
And that was, to me, again, one of those moments that is the best of this country as opposed to some of what we're seeing now, which is like the worst of the country.
Everything is labeled by a letter.
Right.
So, so speaking of that and what you would like to see, what are some of the books that you've read or would recommend to people to read? Sorry.
So no problem. I'm finishing up reading a book by Heather McGhee called The Sum of Us, which is a book that she talks about why and how racism in this country is detrimental to everyone, not just black people or brown people or communities of color, which it is exceptionally detrimental to, but the fact that, racism is a detriment and a pall upon every person in society, and why and how we have to go about thinking of it. And one of which surprised me, there's a portion of the book that talks about Warren, Ohio. And some of the historical racism in Warren, Ohio is either one of the public pools in Warren got drained when the integration passed and blacks were allowed to swim in the pool. Instead of allowing integration, they drained the pool and closed the public pool. And I was like, what? This is like
right in my backyard. Right.
So that book I'm finishing up. And then I like to read. I want to read more, but I read articles and publications, and I'm always interested. But that book just really, because it is related to the work that we're doing at the Hartford Foundation. We actually had Heather come in to one of our events. That I'm finishing that one, and then sort of got a long list of books that I've aspiring to read that I've now actually have to start diving into. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So if you had one day. Okay, now here's another day
You're not going to try to trick me another right. Well, listen,
no, this is better.
I've still got the political in me, so I know how to duck and jump. Bill Clinton said, listen, you can't control the questions, but you can control the answers. So,
I'm a Toastmaster, and we call that the pivot.
You got it. You can ask me what you want.
In fact, there's a couple things that you said that we have an evaluation portion where we write down like good uses of good or bad uses of grammar.
Right.
And there was a couple things that you said, I was like, oh, if I was giving him an evaluation, I would be like, that was a good grammatical. You have
years and years of running my mouth. Every now and then, I was like, this guy knows you talk about. A whole bunch of times, it's just like, please shut up. Yeah.
Okay. So this one's easy. Okay, especially for a talker and somebody with experience,
All
right? If you got to give a State of the Union, not as a president, but just as you, Jay Williams, to the nation, right? What would your message be?
My message would be an admonishment to what I believe to be the 80 to 85% of the people who exist in sort of the middle of the political spectrum. Some might lean a little to the right, some might lean a little to the left.
Okay.
That we have allowed the extremists on the left and the right to drive a wedge and to create a narrative that is allowing the worst of this country to define the existence of the rest of us. That, yes, we're busy and people are trying to raise their families and life can be tough and you have to deal with a whole host of things. But we've disconnected from the body politic. And in doing so, it creates a vacuum where extreme people on the left of the political spectrum and extreme people on the right political spectrum have stepped into that vacuum. And now our democracy is being threatened. Like, I never thought in my lifetime I would be concerned, and maybe this was naive on my part, have to be concerned about the institutions and the foundation of our democracy, that they're, that we would not only have had an insurrection fomented by a sitting president, but that might happen again. And it's because, again, not the 85% of the people who are like, yeah, I might be a little more conservative, you might be a little more liberal. That's fine. But the people who are just extremists who are seeking power for power's sake and who do not have the best interests of this country at heart. That would be my statement. That is this what we're going to allow to undermine and threaten, this experiment in democracy that is an ongoing experiment, but to me is in grave danger of collapsing into, civic chaos and destruction and a whole host of things that are quite shocking and alarming. Yeah.
So I too agree that we do live in an amazing country, which I love. I'm a freedom lover. I've spent some time in different countries and have a hard time with the amount of control that even comes along with some of the handouts and stuff like that. What would you say to people? Because being on, like, I have a lot of listeners, right? A huge gamut across the board. Yeah. But one of the things that is heralded as a good thing, and I believe is a good thing, is passion. Right. So I think it's important to be passionate. I'm thinking of some people right now that are extremely passionately left. They're, we could go down the things. And then I have some very good friends that are extremely passionately right. Good. And passion is the good thing. It's kind of what builds the country. So when does it turn? Where's like if I don't agree with you, I might say, oh, you're an extremist. Right. But if I agree with you, I'm like, oh, he's passionate. So where do you feel like that line is drawn?
The line is crossed when people use passion as a license to dehumanize someone who disagrees with them. Yeah. Be passionate. I'm glad. Listen, passionate people created some of the greatest art and culture that we have. Passionate people perform some of the greatest athletic feats that we all sit in our seats and enjoy. Passionate people compose. It isn't about passion. It's about when that passion becomes a license or a justification for dehumanizing, for debasing, for disregarding someone's lived experience. Yeah. And it's like, oh, but it's all in the name of passion for freedom or passion for this country. And when passion also blinds you to your own shortcomings, your own failings that we all have. There is, depending on who you believe in and what you believe, save Jesus Christ, there is no human being that has walked this earth that is without fault, insecurity, transgression, and we all have to remember that. So, I think that's when the line is crossed. I'm passionate, but sometimes guess what? I'm passionately wrong. And that's the thing that people are like.
And you have to allow the fact that there's an error. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. That's definitely good. And I like that line where it's dehumanizing. Like God himself, who is ultimately right, no spot or sin in him. Exactly. But he is never dehumanizing. In fact, absolutely. He tells us we're worth more than we view ourselves to be worth. Yeah.
So who are we then to say, oh, I got this, God, step aside. I'm going to dehumanize this person because their beliefs or their practices. And it doesn't mean you have to disagree. You have to agree with it.
No, you can disagree.
I didn't agree with everything in the Obama administration. So I had people like, I was like, I can work for the Obama administration and admire him, but not agree with every policy or every position or every decision. And at the same time, I have to remind, it's easy to armchair quarterback a president or armchair quarterback a mayor or armchair quarterback a quarterback. I mean, like, that's the easiest thing in the world, is to sit here in this comfortable chair and be like, oh, he should have done that. He should have done the other.
That's an interesting thing. Okay, so let's move to the youth.
Okay.
Okay. So you have a 13-year-old.
I do.
13.
13. Oh, my God. Yeah. No, 13. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the 13-year-olds, and obviously there's a lot of parents who listen to this, right? Who are probably facing similar, challenges with having a youth in this culture where there's so many voices and stuff. So if there are youth listening, like what is your passion, or what is your, and again, I don't even know the question, but like, I know that, like, if for me, I would tell the youth, hey, like, I mean, there's whole messages, but I want to let them know that there's a place for them. Like, they're in our society. If they're not authentically them, whether it's quiet or shy or, however they feel, that they're different than everybody else, or they don't fit in. But if they are not in that position, there's a gap, because they're so valuable. So there's kind of like my message. What would be yours? Well,
you used a great phrase that I want to pick up on. You said and it's such a perfect phrase, there are so many voices that our youth are competing with. Fewer than when, I don't know, I'm older than you, so I don't know how it is, but I'm older than you. So we've always had competing voices, but there's so many more now because of technology and the interconnectivity of the globe. Part of what I attempt to do with my own child and with you, like, I would say to you, while there's so many voices, always try to find that voice where you know and believe has your best interest at heart. And as a parent, Ethan is going to hear voices from his friends and voices from online and voices from other adults, many of whom are well-meaning, many of whom may not be well-meaning, some of whom may not be neither. They're just voices. And I hope that when he is making decisions, that when he hears those voices, that my voice or his mother's voice or the people who have his best interest at heart, his grandmother's voice, are the one that most resonate and most influence and impact his decisions. Okay. And to our young people, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's a guardian, it's a loved one. It could be a trusted coach or teacher or mentor or whomever. That there are gonna always be lots of voices, but the one that really aligns with someone who, even if you disagree, they have your best interest at heart. That there is nothing they wouldn't do. That they aren't there. That they're okay if you love them today and don't love them tomorrow. They're okay if you think they're but they're like, I just want you to be the best individual that you can be. And again, it's an ongoing battle.
So then to the parents or mentors or aunts or uncles or grandma and grandpas, that would be, I guess, the flip side is to be that kind of person.
Yes.
To be that consistent, whether they love or hate you or agree or disagree.
Absolutely. And to be that. And teenagers, again, physiologically, the emotions and the hormones are raging, and they're like, one day you're like, yeah, you got it. And the next day they can't stand to look at you, and they say all sorts of things that like hurt your feeling, and you can't react. Like when your 14-year-old like isn't really vibing, you got to be like, yep, dude, but I'm there with you. When Ethan's not, I'm like, I'm still loving you. Now, don't get me wrong. He knows how to push those buttons, but I got to check myself. I'm like, dude, you're the adult. This was you 39 years ago or 40 years ago. So Jay, like, keep it in check, and he will get through this. Like, I turned out far from perfect, but I turned out okay, I guess. And I tell him, I was like, my job is to help you become a better version of me. Okay. Like, yes, you got my quirks and you got my flaws. I want to minimize those, and the good attributes I have, I hope those are amplified. And at the end of the day, that will then be your job, is to help your children be the better version of you. Yeah. And it's not always easy. It's not always fun. But it's the job that you have when you become a parent, biologically or otherwise, or a guardian, however you become that trusted figure.
That's, there was some friends of mine, and they, to me, looked like the perfect parents. Their kids were all grown. They were, the last one was getting married, and I was just like, wow, they got it together. And I heard them talking one day, and they were talking to another older couple, And they said, when we were new to this church, we were young parents and we were so frazzled and we felt like we were failing.
Right.
And you guys, they had like a parenting group and they were like, you told us it would be okay.
Right.
And you helped us through that. And there would be times they would like drag in,
Yep.
but just having that community support where
Yep.
they're like, hey, you're not alone. You're
Right.
going to get through this. And now here they are. I'm looking at them like, oh man, they're like, this
Yeah,
perfect family.
yeah.
So to hear that was so interesting, in the value of communication and community.
And community.
Because and I always say, communication is the language of community.
Yep.
Just like English is the language of the United States. Like without communication, you can't have community.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling to other parents.
Right.
Because everybody's feeling like they're failing and at some point, you know what I mean?
And the communication isn't and doesn't always have to be verbal. It's that knowing that it's that look, or knowing that extension of a hug or a hand, or some place where they know they can just come sit in peace.
Yes.
We don't always have to talk it out. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes people just need to be able to sit in the company of others and
Right.
just process their own stuff. So yeah,
Just
I
be a
couldn't agree with
friend
you more.
and
Yeah,
be a friend
just be
and
there.
reach out for a
Yep.
friend.
Yep.
I think so. Okay. Other than your parents, who, and I know there's so many, and so I
Yeah.
don't want to put you on a spot where you feel like you forgot somebody, but
Right.
who would you say is one of your greatest mentors or people who've helped define who you are
Yeah,
today?
absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you said, and this just shows the connection we have, that you said other than my parents, because it always starts with my parents.
Absolutely.
There's no one on this planet who has been more influential to me than my parents in helping shape who I am. So after my parents,
Yeah.
there are a litany of people, and again, I get in trouble naming them, but I without fail talk about my longtime pastor, Bishop Norman L. Wagner, who, after my mom and dad, has been a significant, and he passed away now 13 years ago in 2010.
Yeah.
A significant influence in shaping, me and who I am, both from near and from afar.
Wow.
And then after that, there are, teachers and coaches and people who just took time to, encourage me or admonish me or challenge me.
Wow.
Some of whom, I was at an event earlier today, and there was a room with 100 people in it who I'd encountered over the course of my, career as mayor, and others who I told them, I said, I could take 10 minutes in this room and go through this room and give you an excerpt of how this person left an impact in my life. So, it is really, I think,
That's incredible.
any time I have a chance to meet someone, I always try to keep a mindset that I could walk away having learned something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's what not to do. And sometimes it's like, oh man, thank God that I dodged that bullet. And other times it's like, boy, I would like to replicate that, or sort of understand how I could do or have a characteristic that person has. And that, it doesn't have to be a person I know. It could be a person I've just met in a formal setting or an informal setting or through a conversation.
Wow, that's incredible. So, all right, we're nearing the end, but one more question, and then you could say whatever you want.
Okay.
If we haven't said. How would you like to be remembered if we were talking about your legacy and who Jay Williams was past the time of your departure here on Earth? How would you like to be remembered?
So it's funny. It comes to me easily because I was having this conversation earlier today. I'd want to be remembered as significant. And it's a quote that, again, I heard Bishop Wagner say that significance is paramount to success. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful in this life. I want to be successful. But success has so many fleeting definitions. Is it how much money you make? Is it how big your house is? Is it how famous? Is it how many clicks? Is it how many followers? Is it how many whatever? And that stuff comes and goes, and that's an empty success to me.
Yeah.
Versus being significant, because there's a lot of people who are successful, but that I would argue aren't significant. But there's a whole lot more people that were significant that you will never know their name. You'll never know what they did, but the impact that they left on someone. So, if I'm remembered as being significant, I will, that would be something that I would be content with. And, people say, well, how is he significant? You may not know, but if I'm significant, that means I've left an impact or an impression somewhere in that organization or that community, that person knows. And again, it doesn't mean you have to be one or the other.
I understand.
But in our society, so many times people are chasing success instead of saying, oh, I'm more interested in being significant.
What difference am I making? Interesting. I like that because a lot of times even we're sitting here in this cigar lounge because somebody created it and had the vision for it and stuff. So sometimes we don't even know. I mean, we happen to know these guys, but we don't even know by name. But yet, if it wasn't for Volney Rogers, we wouldn't have Mill Creek Park.
Right, exactly.
That's significant.
Yep.
As you're talking, that's what I'm thinking.
I was down at the WFMJ studio and had a wall showing historical pictures. And people, some of them you knew, some of them you didn't, but what role they played in the formation, of the community that we exist today. And again, you may have disagreed with them politically or ideologically, or they had a different religion, or they didn't believe in religion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that they didn't have a significant impact, and their mark wasn't necessary for us to be where we are today as a community.
Yeah, I love that. I'm thinking of I heard a saying. The Old Testament. Like people like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and stuff, they said that they always talked about a staff, right? So they said there was a thing where when there was a significant event in their life, they would make a little carving on
into the staff,
right. So the staff was unique. It wasn't like, oh, I'm tired of this staff. Like that was a lifelong staff. So it's interesting because as you're talking about each person's mark, I feel like maybe I just got that picture of like an etch. Like each person's etched into the staff of who we are as a city or as a business or country. Okay, so now you're going around, and in addition to being president of the Hartford Foundation, you also are public speaking. Is this like a thing, or is this just something that you're doing because? Is this just something that you're doing because you were asked to by people?
Yeah, so I wish it was a thing. Like I'm trying to figure out the gig that people have where they're invited to speak, so they pay their travel.
Right.
They then give them a 5 or 6 figure speaking. I'm like, that's a gig. Like that's. When I grow up, that's what I'm trying to get to. Where it's like, fly me in, and you don't even have to fly me first class. Just pay my golf fees, and I'll take my speaking figure, and I'll go on to the next. No, so this is because I was asked to do it. In fact, my wife admonishes me. She's like, "No, you got to get out there." And people, I'm like, "This is Youngstown." Like somebody asked me to come back to Youngstown. I'm like, buying my own ticket, trying to get a rental car that I can afford. Stay somewhere reasonable. And I'm it costs me money. It costs me money to come to Youngstown.
That is hilarious.
But it's home. This is what you do.
Have you been to the bunker yet?
The what?
The bunker?
No.
In the Southern Park Mall?
Oh, yeah. Well,
where you could go play golf on the simulators?
I saw it, but I didn't go till I was out walking around. I was like, oh, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And either it wasn't open, it wasn't down, or I didn't know what it was.
Got it. Okay, right. So it's the restaurant. You could go in there and have food or sit up at the bar or whatever. And Bogies does that, which is so good. But then there's these bays where you could literally rent by the hour and have like a little party or a birthday party or just serious. So serious golfers go. And then you get to play golf on some of the best golf courses in the world.
So it's sort of like a Top Golf kind of concept, but you played on simulators. So
I guess
I'm familiar with it.
So if I were a golfer, I feel like I would like it because then you feel like you're at the best golf courses.
And it'd be a lot cheaper for me to hack it up out there. So I'm a frequent golfer. I don't know if avid golfer. I'm an inconsistent golfer. But
when I heard golf, I was like,
no.
So, but you are or would be open to if somebody was inspired by who you are and your story to speaking and stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I've been doing that for years. I love to talk and engage people. Love to share. The things that I've learned, both what not to do, what to do. So. And again, I say this tongue-in-cheek, it does cost me money to come here, but I have had the opportunity, privilege to be invited to speak in other parts of the country and share, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, there is a Youngstown story, or there's some relevant, because I can't get away from it.
Right.
But I have, and I do enjoy and coming to speak to diverse groups and fortunate to have been able to do that and still do it and still enjoy it.
Absolutely.
It's not my day job is the Harvard Foundation, so I got to make sure I'm making sure I'm showing up there.
Right.
Yeah, that pays the bills. But I just enjoy being able to engage and I've got a soft spot for Youngstown. I'm like a sucker for Youngstown. People are like, oh, can you come? We don't really have a big budget. I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. Right.
Let me right now invite you. If you're ever in town for like a week, you got to come to Toastmasters.
Okay. All right.
Give a speech. We'd love it. I'm the president right now.
Yeah, but you guys could be critiquing me. They're like, yeah, Williams, you did okay, but like we got these 4 areas over here.
There are some people they love the evaluation portion.
I get it from my wife, who is like an English major. So you're talking too fast. Your voice is going up. You're smacking your lips. You gotta slow it down. No, I would welcome that.
It was Monday night. So if you ever find yourself in town, okay. So can people? Okay, before I let you give your parting, like just hoorah message, if you have one, how can people connect with you if they wanted to?
Wow. Yeah. So I'm. That's a good question because I'm not like on social media.
Yeah.
When Twitter came out, I was like, nobody cares what I had for lunch. I'm not like being on. So
do you have a website or yeah?
You got to prepare me for this. So I am on Twitter.
That's okay, guys. Just Google him.
Or X. Like if you Google put Jay Williams Youngstown, because if you put Jay Williams, like this other guy comes up. Like I'm like this dude, like basketball player. I'm like, no, that's not me. So if you put Jay Williams like Youngstown or Jay Williams Hartford Foundation, my contact information come up.
Okay.
Worst comes to worst, I'm like Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. Put that in.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's good enough. That's good enough. Yeah. Because just in case
I don't have a brand. You're hitting me now. I don't have like a brand to like hand people like, hey, hit me up. Like, be my follower. Hit the smash button or whatever. Ethan's like, in fact, my son has a better YouTube presence. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. I gotta ask Ethan to hook me up with like a brand presence or something.
There you go. There you go. That's awesome. Okay. One last hoorah message for the Youngstown Click audience.
We're getting too loud, too long. He's got paying members that want to come in here. He's like, I love you guys, but I got like paying members. Right.
Yeah, get us some coffee, Anthony. I'm kidding. Guys, make sure that if you come to Sigaro, you say hello to Anthony, the amazing, wonderful, he's here sometimes, but the amazing, wonderful guy that will sell you guitars, cigars.
See, I don't smoke. I don't know my way around, so I'm not a paying customer. So he's like, dude, it's cool to have you here as former mayor, but I got people who are going to spend money. You got to get out of here since you don't do cigars, man. So
I hope he's not keeping people from coming up.
Right, yeah, I don't know.
Normally you hear people talking in the background and everything. Okay. Okay, so one last
listen,
Jay Williams message to the world.
It is just such a wonderful place to be from, to be... to live and the Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley will always be a place that is both inspiring and at times frustrating. I don't know. I think that's just life and that's living. Yeah. But I just want to thank you for what you did. So we had not met, or we had met briefly.
No,
you knew my wife, right?
Yes.
So when you asked me, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm coming home. Like, I'll do this thing. Yeah. Then I was like, oh man, I'm not really podcast. How does this go? Like, is this gonna go well? Is this gonna be awkward? And we hit it off like from the moment I walked in the door. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
The Youngstown Click podcast.
Yes.
Like, people subscribe, whatever it is, podcast, whatever the right word is. I don't know if you subscribe or cash on, you send in a like self-addressed stamped envelope and you become a member. I'm real old.
Oh, yes. Right. Send in $99.95.
Right, yeah, exactly, right. And it will deliver to you. And it's two, you just got to pay, even though it's like, we can put them in the same box, but you got to pay a separate shipping and handling. Like, wait a minute, just put it in the same box.
And Jay Williams will sign every one.
Absolutely. So that's all I have to say. I'm going too long. Thank you for what you do, for your enthusiasm, for your authenticity. This has been great. I've enjoyed this more than I could have ever imagined, and I get to whatever the link is. Yeah. I'm going to send this to Ethan. I'm like, look at your dad. So it's either going to be really cringy, or he's going to be like, Dad, man, this is super cool. I didn't think you had it in you.
Say something really good about Ethan.
Right. This kid, love him to death. Wouldn't trade him for anything in the world. And his YouTube is like Diamond the Dominator. So, people want to go see him play his drums. He does drum solos. He does Minecraft, but I think Diamond the Dominator, I think, is his YouTube presence.
Okay, guys, go hit like on that. What, as they say, smash the
button. Right. So if he gets like 5 more followers after this, I am gold. I'm like the father of the century.
All right, guys, let's do that. Let's do that. I love it. I love it. I love
Thank
it.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Former Mayor Jay Williams, and just a wonderful all around good person.
I appreciate it.
I mean, literally, there were so many times I was like, I could take this one of 5 directions. I don't know which direction to take this because
It's like
there's
I
just
think
so
we
much
went
to
all
talk
over the
about.
map. So people be
I
like,
love it.
was there any sequiturs there? Right.
I love it. I love it. So, guys, once again, we're coming to you from Sigaro with an S Cigar Lounge in Hubbard, Ohio, right there on Main Street. The downstairs floor, you could come in anytime they're open, buy a cigar, or buy gift cigars for people that you know and love who love cigars, or just stay here and enjoy a cigar. The upstairs is for members only, but it's such a cool place to come hang out. Come check it out. And once again, thanks to OhioFlame.com for I keep saying trusting in, believing in Youngstown Click, believing in who we are and what we're doing. And don't forget to subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to do to Youngstown Click Be Connected podcast. We are now on iTunes, Apple, Google. Apple is iTunes, but anyway, anywhere you get your podcast.
I'm an Atari guy, so I'm dating myself. Like Atari is what I know well. So
there you go. All right. Well, thank you again, and until next time, you guys. You are the best part of what makes Youngstown Click. Never forget or underestimate your worth and your ability. You are the connection between more than you realize. So don't ever underestimate that. And until next time, I will talk to you later.